Hey everybody, this is Perch. So this isn't a review of Sins of Sinister, but it's sort of a review. So there will be some spoilers, and we'll talk about it a little bit. Sins of Sinister, if you don't know, is Kieran Gillen, who's writing all the events these days. Is basically this is a what is it? Let's see, it's a 9, 10, 11. I think it's an 11 issue series where you've got two bookend chapters, and then you got a bunch of kind of, basically it's taking over the Nightcrawler book, the Immortal X-Men book, and the X-Men Red. I think that's what it's taking over, and they're called different things. You got Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants, and you have the Immoral X-Men, I think, and then anyway, that's what you got. So Kieran Gillen was the one who kind of turned Sinister into a very different character way back in his run on the X-Men when they were living on the little island outside San Francisco. And up until that point, Sinister had been a fairly kind of in the shadows type character. He had, they didn't do a lot. He was a manipulator basically. You wouldn't see much of him. The character actually went along in Claremont's X-Men for a long time before we really even saw very much of him. Even when he was brought more to the forefront in Inferno, first of all, that was some time after the Mutant Massacre, where he was sort of kind of pulling the strings behind the behind the scenes. So anyway, but for a long time he was this kind of shadowy manipulator type character, very threatening. And then they decided to turn him into kind of cheesy, over the top goofball, villain. And that was Gillen's doing. And then kind of he never really emerged from that. There's a couple of writers who after that tried to kind of pull it back and have Sinister be kind of threatening again, but he was kind of forever tainted with this, I'm going to be a ludicrous kind of vamping over the top, type character. Basically almost like I'm going to be a villain Deadpool. Just that's what they did. I didn't like the change in the character, so no surprise. And Sins of Sinister is a Sinister focused event and is written by Gillen. So, in fairness to the writer and to the comic, you know exactly what you're going to get, and they deliver it. They deliver you that kind of over the top, silly Sinister. That's what they do. A dangerous Sinister for sure, but an over the top one. And basically, in this comic, the premise is that Sinister got a hold of Moira's genes. He's using it to create, quote unquote, save points where he's cloning her, and he's able to just kind of reset things to his desire, which feels like maybe a way they get out of this entire Krakoa X-Men mess. And he, in this comic, he had attacked the X-Men. So really, the interesting part about Sins of Sinister is that you really have to read a couple issues of the Immortal X-Men before you get into this, because Sinister is doing all this plotting about what's going on. And so if you just pick up this comic and you haven't been reading the Immortal X-Men, it won't make any sense. But in fairness, I don't know anybody who's picking up Sins of Sinister just out of nowhere anyway. That book is very much geared toward people who are reading the current run. So he finally determines he needs to get to Hope and corrupt her. And in corrupting her, he basically puts a little bit of himself in her, and that gives kind of some level of control. Basically, turns her into a like an axe, like Rick Remender did this. He turns her into a bad version of herself. But he also does the same for Professor X and Emma Frost, and oh god, who else? Not Exodus. Anyway, he changes a couple members of the council, and then they proceed to change everyone else. So they send the gene out into the world, and all the humans start getting infected with this. And I think it's explained at one point that it either turns them into a clone of Sinister, sort of, or it at least kind of it enhances their most immoral desires for some reason. And so it's basically Sinister taking over the world. And there's a little bit of a plot twist there where Sinister is basically his new creations, the clones of himself, posing as Hope and Xavier and other, they basically turn on him and decide to do their own thing. And then he has to go back, and he's like, I'm going to go back and restart this again, but discovers somebody has stolen his lab and his Moira clones, and he's trapped. And that's now what we're going to get. We're going to get several issues of Sinister's world and what he's set loose and how it's all going to play out. Um, as I said, this wasn't a review. The story is fine. I'll tell you, the story is miles better than AXE or even Gillen's Eternal series. It's better than those books. But still, there's a certain exhaustion reading this where the problem is it's like everything has been changed into Sinister. It's like so it's an Elseworlds book because we're all going to get back to the beginning by the time this is all done. This is not the new status quo. But also there's the taking a threatening character off the board. And in fairness, Sinister has been written this way for a while now, so it's not like this was a new development. But as you're reading this, it really kind of hammers home this is different. I'm kind of enjoying seeing Colossus being a dick, and it's a little bit with J. Jonah Jameson's kind of fun, and oh, look at that. Schadenfreude. It's Sinister is undone by his own creations. So there's a certain elements of that, sure, but it gets tiring very quickly. And this is the first issue, so now we're going to see alt versions of everybody kind of doing their own shit, and we'll see how that goes. There's a couple interesting parts that are deep in continuity, like you can't corrupt Storm because Storm erased herself from the Krakoa vault of resurrection, so they can't infect her. So anyway, there's a couple little things they're going to play with there. But by and large, what I'm struck by is that this is villains. We're no longer to threatening villains. We're in villains and their wacky hijinks, and this is a wacky hijinks book. Fundamentally, that's what you've got here. It's Sinister vamping and doing crazy shit, and the other villains are also doing some. They're running around being sarcastic and making jokes and quipping at each other, and it's like if you took an MCU movie and you filled it with just villains that quip at each other, and that's what you got. So not that it's awful, but it's not anything that's going to last and matter. And so where it came, what kind of struck me is once upon a time, the X-Men events, the Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, Inferno, even the Extinction Agenda, stuff that came a little later, all of those events had a tipping point, or they basically changed the line. They felt threatening. They felt like we were reading something that was going to have some long-lasting implications, and those may be bad for our comic. They may change things forever. But it was going to, like, we were headed toward a different direction. With Fall of the Mutants, it was like, this is going to radically upend the status quo. And you didn't see it happen very much back then, but the idea of nothing will be the same again, it was true. Nothing will be the same again. We're changing things. Today, when you read this, you start off the comic by knowing that things will be the same again. It is not going to upend the status quo. It's just it's going to be like it was, and it's going to keep going. Like that there is no status quo shift. There is nothing will be the same again. There is a promise that it will be the same again, and that combined with this silly, wacky Sinister, who once upon a time was a deeply threatening agent of change in the books. The character is like quipping, like, well, none of this matters. I got to go back and just restart things again. I got to get back to my save point and try again. Maybe this time I'll do it with an extra hot latte. And as you're reading this stuff, it's like, yeah, I mean, the threatening villain doesn't really care. Why do I care? Why? I guess the problem is the story. Really great stories, they stand on the shoulders of many things. Certainly great writing, great art. The art is good for this. It's perfectly solid art. But they stand on the shoulders of great writing. They stand on the shoulders of great art. And they stand on the shoulders of feeling like it's going to matter. That reading this is going to have a profound change, either to the way you interpret things because the story is so good, or to the other stories you will read later. It's a story that matters. And the challenge is, with this comic, you're told very quickly, I mean, immediately, this story isn't going to matter. This is a wacky kind of Elseworlds look on what would happen if Sinister took over everything. So, with that leg of the stool kind of destroyed, we're now down to the writing has to be really great and the art has to be really great in order for the story to be remembered. Well, as I said, the art's good. It's again, the art's not like amazing, like the most amazing thing you've ever read, but the art's solid. The writing is a bunch of quips. Again, it's not bad, but it's like, have you ever wanted to see Hope and Exodus kind of make crack jokes at each other? You do? You wanted to see this? Cool. Have you ever wanted to see like Professor X and Emma Frost be like sinisterly, catty to each other? This comic will give you that. You want something more substantive? Yeah. So the story kind of, if I'm reviewing this comic, I'd say the story rests on the shoulders of, not bad art, pretty okay art. It rests on the shoulders of very weak writing, all based on kind of, the desire to have Sinister do something kind of horrific and then joke about it. And it stands on no shoulders of ultimately mattering as a story. Now, this is way too harsh, by the way. I'm being far too hard on this comic. It's not that bad, and it's an entertaining read, but it's not. I don't know. I mean, as an event, again, I'm coming at this from the perspective of once upon a time, you had X-Men events, and the X-Men events were events. They were truly an event, and today it's it's the equivalent of a couple issues of an Elseworlds book. It's Batman Legends issue 16 to 17. Positioned and sold as an event. I'm trying to look. I am trying not to make this a brutal, like, really harsh review, because it doesn't deserve that. It really doesn't. And I've been super critical of a lot of the X-Men books, but it doesn't. It's okay. Like I said, this is the best thing Gillen has read, or has written for Marvel in several years. So okay. It just it's hard to overlook kind of the silliness of it. If you did a big event that was supposed to be, if you did like Secret Wars 3, except the Beyonder turned out to be Deadpool, you wouldn't have an event. You'd have Deadpool fucks around in the Marvel Universe. That's what you'd have. Anyway, I don't know. Did you read this comic? Again, I feel like I'm being way too hard on it, because it really wasn't terrible, but it was exhausting, if that makes any sense. And it's unfortunately a very stark reminder that we're a very long place from where we've been. Not that everything should go back, but it would be nice to have, stories with weight. I guess that's faith. Anyway, thanks for listening.